Welcome back to another story from the rugged West. Tonight we ride into the heart of a land that remembers every scar carved into its dust. A lonely rancher, haunted by ghosts of war and guilt, finds something in the desert no man was meant to see. A sign written in anger, a child on the edge of death, and a secret that could set the whole frontier ablaze. So saddle up, partner, because by the time this story's done, you'll learn that in the Old West, forgiveness was rarer than rain, and mercy could cost a man his life. The wind blew dry and steady across the open plains, stirring up thin veils of dust that drifted like ghosts. Thomas Cade rode slow, his hat low against the sun, his horse tired from miles of silence. He'd been alone for years, by choice. After the war, after the raids, after the blood. He'd built his ranch far from town and farther from people. Cattle, whiskey, and the wind. That was all he kept company with. But that morning something changed. As he rode the trail back from the creek, he saw crows circling low over a cottonwood tree near the ridge. He tugged the reins. Easy, boy. The closer he got, the quieter the world seemed to become, until even the horse's hooves felt too loud. Then he saw it. A small figure slumped beneath the tree, skin the color of clay and hair matted with dust. It was maybe 10, maybe 12. Alive, barely. A crude wooden sign was staked in the ground beside her, scrawled in black soot. White man don't forgive. Thomas froze. His throat tightened. That phrase, he'd heard it once before. Years ago, whispered in a burning village during the war. It wasn't a message. It was a warning. He jumped down, tore off his coat, and knelt beside the girl. Her breathing was faint, her wrists bruised, her dress torn from travel and struggle. He felt for a pulse. Weak but there. Hang on, little one, he muttered, lifting her gently. She winced, then went limp against his chest. He looked at the sign again. The handwriting wasn't Apache. It was English, rough, uneven, done in rage. Whoever did this wanted her to die here, and wanted him, or someone like him, to see it. He glanced over the ridge, nothing but heat and emptiness. Damn, he whispered, and rode hard for home. By sundown he reached his ranch. A lonely patch of land fenced by barbed wire, a single cabin standing against the horizon. He carried the girl inside, laid her on his cot, and fetched water. Her lips were cracked, her eyes flickered open once, dark, wary. When he tried to offer water, she flinched and turned away. Easy, he said softly. You're safe here. No answer. Just that look, like a wild thing that had learned not to trust hands, no matter how gentle. He tended her wounds as best he could. Bullet grazes, rope burns, dust fever. She'd been through hell. When he stepped outside, he saw the sign again, leaning against his barn where he'd brought it back. White man don't forgive. The words gnawed at him. Who wrote it? And why leave her alive? He poured himself a drink, but the whiskey burned more than usual. Maybe because the last time he'd seen an Apache child, it was during a raid, one that ended in screams and fire. He'd followed orders back then. He hadn't looked back. Until now, the girl awoke near midnight. Thomas heard her moving, light, cautious steps across the wooden floor. He sat up slow, not wanting to scare her. You thirsty? He asked quietly. She didn't answer, but her eyes darted toward the jug on the table. He poured a little into a tin cup and pushed it toward her. After a moment, she reached for it. Trembling hands, quick glances toward the door. She drank fast, then looked at him again. Why? She whispered. Her voice was raw. Why what? Why help? Thomas stared at the fire. Because somebody didn't. Silence filled the cabin, heavy but not empty. She finally said, They said, You kill, he nodded slowly. Yeah, I did, once, long time ago. Her small face was unreadable. The nose, maybe they right, he let out a low breath. Maybe they are. Outside, the coyotes howled. Inside, two broken souls shared the same fire, both haunted by ghosts that refused to fade. Thomas didn't know who left that sign, or why, but he could feel it deep down in his bones. Someone wanted this girl dead, and they'd come looking soon enough, and when they did, the lonely rancher would be ready to face the past he'd buried too long. The next morning, the desert smelled of rain that never came. Thomas Cade stepped outside, feeling the dry wind tug at his coat as if warning him to leave things buried. But the sign still leaned against his barn. And the girl was still inside, alive, quiet, and too light for someone who had fought this long to stay that way. He poured water into a trough for his horse, then looked toward the horizon. Far off, 3 buzzards circled slow and patient. He didn't like that. Buzzards meant something dead, or something about to be. When he came back in, the girl sat up on the cot, her dark eyes following him like a wary cat. "You got a name?" he asked. She hesitated, then said softly, "Taya." It was barely more than a whisper, but it was the first thread of trust between them. "Taya," he repeated, nodding. "Good, I'm Thomas. You can call me that or not call me anything at all. Don't matter much." Her gaze drifted to the old rifle hanging above the door. "You shoot people?" she asked. "Used to," he said. "For gold?" "For orders. Now?" He looked out the window. "Now I shoot coyotes." She didn't smile. But he thought he saw a flicker, something human, fragile, trying to surface. He spent the afternoon mending a fence, pretending not to notice how she crept to the door to watch him work. Every sound made her flinch, the creak of wood, the whistle of wind. By habit, Thomas scanned the ridges every few minutes, his soldier's instinct alive again. That's when he saw it, faint dust trail maybe a mile out, 3 riders small as ants against the shimmering light. Moving slow, too slow for travelers. He felt his stomach tighten. He went back inside. "Taya, get under that bed and don't come out till I say." She obeyed without a word. The fear in her eyes told him she knew the kind of men that made dust like that. Thomas loaded his rifle, then walked to the porch, where he sat in his old chair as if waiting for the evening breeze. By the time the riders drew close, the sun had dropped low, throwing gold and blood across the sky. The first man called out, "Howdy, friend. Fine day for riding, ain't it?" Thomas didn't answer. The man smiled too easily. He was young, dressed like a trail hand, but rode with the swagger of someone who'd never earned calluses. Behind him were 2 rougher men, one with a scar down his jaw, the other carrying a sawed-off shotgun strapped across his back. Thomas spat into the dirt. "You boys lost?" "No," the first one said. "Just looking for something or someone." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded paper. A drawing. Crude but clear enough. A young Apache girl, long hair, small frame. "You seen her?" he asked. Thomas studied it without blinking. "Can't say I have." The man grinned. "That's funny. Word in town says you've been riding toward the canyons yesterday. Lot of sign of trouble that way." "I was hunting strays," Thomas said evenly. The man leaned forward in the saddle. "Strays come in all shapes, mister. Some got horns, some got feathers." The air went still. Thomas let his hand rest near his holster. "You boys riding for the law?" The man laughed. "Law? No, sir. We ride for payment." Girl ran off from her owners. "Worth a nice pile of gold if brought back alive. Worth half that if she ain't." Thomas's jaw tightened. "You just told me all I need to know." The man's smile dropped. "You sure you ain't seen her?" "Pretty sure. Mind if we take a look around?" Thomas's eyes hardened. "I do." Silence stretched thin. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The scarred man's hand twitched toward his gun, and that's when Thomas moved. The rifle cracked once, echoing off the rocks. The man's hat flew off, a clean warning shot that sliced a lock of hair. "Next one don't miss," Thomas said. The 3 stared at him, surprise flashing to rage, then calculation. Finally, the leader raised his hand slightly. "All right, old man. We ain't looking for a fight. You want to protect her, that's your funeral." He grinned again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "Just remember the desert talks. And we'll be back." They turned and rode off slow, dust curling behind them like a trail of smoke. Thomas watched until they disappeared beyond the ridge, then went back inside. Taya crawled from under the bed, eyes wide. They know, I know," he said. "They will come back. I know that too." He poured water into a basin and splashed his face, staring at the worn reflection in the cracked mirror. Once he'd been a soldier who took orders. Now he'd made himself judge and defender, maybe even target. He looked at the girl. "Who are they, Taya?" She hesitated. "Traitors. From Fort Mason. They took me from my people, sold me to white men in the hills. But I ran." Thomas froze. Her words carried weight, the kind that turned men's souls black with guilt or rage. He sat heavily on the edge of the table. "How long you been running?" 2 sons, no food. No water. He nodded slowly. Then you're safe now. But we'll need to move before they bring more men. Taya tilted her head. You help? Why? He looked toward the fire, the orange light painting the years of regret across his face. Because once I didn't. Outside, the night came alive with distant thunder, but no storm followed. It was the sound of hooves, faint and growing. More riders. Thomas blew out the lamp and reached for his rifle. Taya's small hand clutched his sleeve. He whispered, "Don't be afraid." But in truth, he was. Because this time, he wasn't just fighting for his own ghosts. He was standing between an innocent child and a world that... The night didn't end. It just bled into dawn. The desert sky turned gray, the kind that warned of trouble before the sun could burn it away. Thomas Cade hadn't slept. He sat by the window, rifle across his knees, watching the ridgeline where he knew they'd come from. Inside the cabin, Taya lay wrapped in a blanket by the dying fire. When she stirred, Thomas whispered, "Stay low. Don't talk. Don't move unless I say." She nodded, her eyes half open, calm in a way only those who've already seen too much could be. By sunrise, they came. 6 riders this time. Dust kicked up behind them like smoke from a funeral pyre. Thomas slipped out the back door, circling the corral. He'd set traps overnight, wires, stakes, and a few dynamite sticks from the old mine shaft he kept for coyotes. If they wanted war, they'd get it. The lead rider, same one from before with that grin like a snake, rode up to the gate and called out, "Mr. Cade, you got something don't belong to you." Thomas stood in the open now, rifle steady in his hands. "Only thing that don't belong here is you," the man smirked. "You got a big heart, old man. Shame if somebody put a hole in it." He nodded toward his men. 2 dismounted, moving toward the cabin. Thomas fired once. The first man dropped like a stone. The second dove for cover behind a trough. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the world. The leader's smile died. "Kill him!" Gunfire erupted. Bullets ripped into the barn, splintering wood. Horses screamed. Thomas ducked, rolled behind a water barrel, and returned fire. Calm, precise, deadly. Each shot was a piece of memory. Battles long buried under whiskey and time, all roaring back in one breath. He caught one in the shoulder, another in the thigh. But for every one he hit, 2 more came closer. Then the sound he dreaded, the crack of the back door being kicked open. They'd gone for the girl. Thomas sprinted through the smoke and into the cabin. One of the men, scarred jaw, same bastard from yesterday, had Taya by the wrist, dragging her toward the door. "Let her go," Thomas roared. The man turned, smirking. "You should have stayed out of this, rancher." He pressed his pistol to the girl's head. Thomas didn't blink. He raised his rifle and fired. The man's body went limp before his finger could pull the trigger. Taya stumbled free, trembling but alive. He grabbed her hand. "Out the back, go!" They ran for the horse pen, bullets tearing into the walls around them. Thomas fired back, buying seconds that felt like hours. "Taya, in the shed!" he shouted. She dove inside, crawling behind feed sacks. Thomas reloaded, crouching low. He could hear boots crunching on gravel. 3 men left, closing in. He lit a fuse, one of the dynamite sticks he'd wired to the gate, and waited. When the riders burst through, shouting, the world exploded. The blast threw dirt and smoke skyward. Horses reared. Men screamed. Thomas was knocked flat, ears ringing, chest burning. When he got up, everything was still. Only the sound of wind and fire filled the air. He staggered toward the wreckage, saw one man crawling, reaching for a revolver. Thomas kicked it away. "You're done." The man looked up, coughing blood. You don't know who you're fighting." Thomas leveled his rifle. "Then tell me." "They ain't mine," the man wheezed. "They're Harkner's." The name hit like a thunderclap. Thomas froze. "Colonel Harkner?" The man nodded weakly. "He sends the girls to the forts. Sells 'em. Half Apache, half white, says they don't belong anywhere." He coughed once more, then went still. Thomas stepped back, his breath unsteady. Harkner. The same name that had haunted him through the war. The same man whose orders had turned villages to ash. And now, even out here, his shadow still reached. He walked back to the shed and opened the door. Taya looked up, shaking. "Are they gone?" "For now," he said. She saw the blood on his sleeve. "You hurt," he shrugged. "Had worse. More come?" Maybe, he sighed, but not before dark. We ride tonight? She hesitated, then asked, You know name Harkner? Thomas nodded. Too damn well. She lowered her head. He's the one who took me. He clenched his fists. Then he's the one who'll pay. That evening, as the sun bled red across the land, Thomas buried the dead near the fence line. No crosses, no markers, just earth and silence. He leaned on his shovel, staring into the horizon where Fort Mason lay, 2 days' ride east. He'd spent years hiding from his sins, but this felt like something close to purpose. Taya stood beside him, the wind tugging at her hair. You help me, she said softly. Why? He looked at her, then at the graves. Because maybe you help me too. Her eyes met his, quiet, strong, far older than her years. Then she said something that stopped him cold. My father, she whispered, was killed by white soldiers. One name he say before he die, Cade. The shovel slipped from his hands. The world tilted. The sound of the wind faded. He stared at her, unable to speak. Cade, his own name. He had been there. He had followed orders that day. Taya watched his face, confusion and hurt crossing her own. It was you? Thomas's lips parted, but no words came. The truth lay between them, heavy as the sky. He finally whispered, I didn't know. Not until now. Taya took a step back. Then maybe the sign was right. She turned toward the horizon. White man don't forgive. Thomas closed his eyes. Maybe not, but maybe he can try. The night swallowed their silence. In the distance, thunder rolled again. And this time it wasn't the storm. The storm broke just before dawn. Rain came in sheets, turning the desert dust into red mud that clung to hooves and boots alike. Thomas Cade and Taya rode in silence, two shadows bound by something deeper than vengeance. Fort Mason rose from the plains like a scar, weathered stone, barbed wire, and the tattered flag of a nation that had long forgotten mercy. Smoke curled from the chimneys. Men moved along the ramparts, and somewhere inside those walls, Colonel Harkner, the man who'd destroyed both their lives, waited. Thomas reined in his horse at the ridge. This is where it ends, he said quietly. Taya didn't look away from the fort. You kill him? Thomas hesitated. His knuckles whitened on the reins. Maybe, or maybe I just let him see what he made. The wind hissed through the sagebrush. They dismounted, tethered the horses in the canyon below, and started the long climb toward the rear of the fort. Thomas knew the walls. He'd helped build them once, years ago, when Fort Mason was a promise instead of a prison. Now it felt like he was sneaking into his own sins. By mid-morning, the rain had slowed. A supply wagon rolled toward the rear gate, guarded by 2 soldiers too wet and too tired to care. Thomas waited until the wagon hit the muddiest patch of trail, then motioned to Taya. He slipped from the rocks, silent as a ghost, knife in hand. 2 strikes, fast, quiet. When the bodies hit the ground, Taya flinched but didn't scream. They dragged the soldiers behind the rocks, then climbed into the wagon, pulling a tarp over themselves. Minutes later, the gates opened. The wagon rolled inside. Fort Mason was a carcass of its former self. Half the buildings empty, the parade ground turned into a holding pen. Thomas peeked through a tear in the tarp and froze. There were women, dozens of them, young, old, native mestiza, chained, beaten, eyes hollow. The brides the traders sold to settlers. Taya's breath hitched. My sister, she whispered. I see her. Thomas followed her gaze, a thin girl near the center, face bruised but unmistakable. He grabbed her wrist gently. Not yet. We get Harkner first, she nodded, trembling. Then we take them all. They waited until the wagon stopped near the stables. Thomas slipped out, snatched a fallen rifle, and moved toward the command quarters. He knew where Harkner would be, same place he always was. Behind his desk, sipping whiskey and pretending he hadn't damned 100 lives for profit. The door creaked open. There he was, older, heavier, but the same cold eyes. Well, I'll be damned, Harkner said, setting down his glass. Thomas Cade, I figured you drank yourself to death years ago. Thomas stepped in, rifle raised. Maybe I should have. Would have been easier than remembering. Harkner chuckled. You've got a talent for showing up where you're not wanted. You here to beg forgiveness? Or to join my side again? I'm here, Thomas said, voice low. To finish what you started. Harkner stood, hands behind his back. You're angry about the half-breeds, I suppose. Don't be. You think those settlers want to live next to savages? I give the girls a place, a purpose. Thomas's jaw tightened. You give them chains. And you gave them bullets, Harkner sneered. Don't act righteous now, Cade. You burned their villages same as me. The only difference is I don't drink to forget it. Thomas's hand trembled. For a second he saw it all. The fires, the screams, the orders barked through smoke. And behind it, the small girl clinging to her father's leg. Taya. He lowered the rifle just an inch. Maybe you're right, he said softly. But I can still choose what happens next. The door slammed open. Tia burst in, a revolver in her hand. Her eyes locked on Harkner. You, Harkner laughed. The savage child. I wondered if you'd made it this far. He drew his own pistol. Your father begged before he died. Will you? The shot came before the echo. Harkner staggered. Not from Taya's gun, but from Thomas's. A single bullet through the chest. He looked down in disbelief, then collapsed across his desk. Silence filled the room. Taya lowered her gun slowly. You kill him, Thomas nodded. He had it coming. She stared at the body, then whispered, now what? He took a deep breath. Now we burn this place down. They moved fast, unlocking cells, freeing women, breaking open the armory. Some couldn't walk. Some refused to leave, but most ran. Smoke rose as torches met dry wood. Flames swallowed the parade ground. The fort that had once been built for control was now dying for freedom. Thomas stood at the gate, rifle slung over his back, watching it all burn. Taya's sister clung to her side, crying softly. Taya turned to him. You go now? He looked at her, the girl who had every reason to hate him, yet stood beside him anyway. I've got nowhere left to go, he said. You stay with us, she said simply. Help build again. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's the first thing I've done right. The sky above them turned gold with dawn. For the first time in years, Thomas Cade didn't feel the weight of ghosts on his shoulders. He turned to the women gathered around the burning fort. Listen to me, he said, voice strong now. No one owns you. No one trades you. No one writes your story but you. You ride free now. And if anyone tries to take that away, you tell him Thomas Cade said hell's waiting. A murmur rose, then cheers. The fire behind them raged brighter, and as the first light of morning hit the desert, they rode, not as victims, but as survivors. If this story stirred something in you, the fight for freedom, redemption, and second chances, then don't let it fade here. Share this story. Let others feel the dust, the fire, and the hope. Because legends like Thomas Cade aren't just born. They're remembered by those who believe that even the lost can find their way home.